So I've been thinking a lot about new ways to express myself artistically in our current COVID environment. And I thought it would be nice to try to do some home performances of some of my music. I don't have any acoustic instruments at home, which is a problem, but I do have two small MIDI keyboards and my favorite piece of software ever, Max, which is an interactive music programming environment. Now, I haven't written anything for keyboard and Max in a very long time, but there is a piece that I wrote almost 20 years ago called Surrounded by Mirrors that was originally for a MIDI wind controller, MIDI keyboard player, and Max. I'm still pretty happy with the piece overall, enough that I performed a modified version of the third movement on its own a few times in my grad school days, and I thought that this would be a good opportunity to update it and then potentially do a YouTube production performance of it or a live stream of it. In order to do this, the Max patch needs some serious updating. As you can imagine, a lot has changed in the Maxed program in the past 20 years. So there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't work anymore. I've also since upgraded some of my master patch framework for more recent projects, like the piece that I wrote recently for acoustic trumpet and interactive electronics. It struck me that instead of doing all of the programming updates behind the scenes and only putting out the final product as a live stream performance or recorded performance, I could do a developer's blog series about it, show the patch in its current state, talk about what needs to be changed, make those changes as videos, and then test drive it before I do the actual live performance of it. Hopefully by doing this, I can inspire others to potentially use Max or PD, or even help those that might be already familiar with Max find new ways to be able to express themselves and realize the visions for their own projects. As an introduction to this, I thought I'd do a brief overview of the patch as it is from 20 years ago. Before I get into that, however, I do want to do a quick ask on behalf of freelance musicians and artists everywhere. This COVID thing has severely impacted some of my close friends and colleagues who depend on gigs for their livelihood. There's been some great work done to provide relief options and avenues where performances can happen virtually and people can still pay for them in order to support their favorite artists. Go out and try to find ways to support the artists and the musicians that you love through this COVID pandemic. If you have any interest in supporting my own work, you can make a donation to my contemporary music concert series, Niente Forte. I'll put links to resources to help any freelance musician, and also a link to where you can donate to Niente Forte in the video description below. So here's my patch. And something that you might notice as we go through this is when you go into the patch, there is some stuff here where this normally used to be justified. For some reason, the font changes between Max 5 or Max 6 when I first wrote this versus now has made it so that certain things that used to be justified and be one row turned into two rows. So I hope you can forgive some of the sloppy text justification for some of these patches that are in here. The way that I build a lot of my Max patches is to split them into two subcategories of sub-patches. In the first half, I have what I call performance patches. These are the patches that actually create sound as a part of the interactive performance. A few of these are strictly scripted, meaning that if you say go, then they run and do their own thing. A good example of that is some of the digital audio patches where, for example, these backward bells, here you can see that if I decide to say bell pitches 1, 2, or 3, let's just do 3 and do all of them at once right here, and turn on the audio, then that sets off this metronome, and that metronome just activates these 3 pitches, and they just go without any interactive element involved. Whatever the performer is playing on a keyboard or the wind controller or whatever else is not going to modify this patch. This patch is just running completely on its own. Now, on the other hand, more of my patches are more organic and flexible, reacting to certain things that are happening in the performance itself, as opposed to just turning on and running on its own with no reaction at all to what the performer is actually doing. A good example of something that reacts better to the performer is my drone patch. Let me find that. So this is my drone patch. Here, if I have set up this, right now you can hear that B. I'm going to add another note to that now. Let's add both the 100, which adds an E, and then 90, which is an A, that creates this open fifth texture. And that, if you notice, is doing a decrescendo. As soon as I activated that drone, it did a decrescendo. It's going from this velocity, 127, down until 10. I can set how soft I want that to reach as it goes down from 127 down to 10. Now, the other thing that makes that happen is if I have my keyboard on, which I'm going to turn on right now, the bottom you're going to hear, then anytime that I hit any of the notes in the bottom half of my keyboard, it resets that 127 and decrescendos it back down to 10 again. So if the performer is playing a bunch of notes, it gives them the liberty to kind of do it at their own tempo and create a unique performance regardless of how these notes are actually happening. And it creates individual personality, individual character to how the performer decides to go. So that's a way to create a patch that creates more organicism in the performance and allows the performer the ability to play with the computer a little bit, depending on how the music is supposed to happen. And that's one of the most key things about the creation of electronic music with acoustic instruments is that, I've said this before in one of my previous videos, but before, when you had electronics that were just strictly tape pieces and acoustic instruments had to play to the tape, then you're playing to a click track or you're playing in reaction to a very fixed medium. And a very important part of interactive electronic music is the idea that you should not be a slave to the computer. You as a performer should be the one that is controlling the performance, and the computer is a thing that needs to react to you and not vice versa. And that's what Max is for. So these are the performance patches that I have. The other half of the patches that I create are more interface based and logistical patches, things that create this note display so that the performer or the computer engineer can see what's actually happening with it. Things to turn on and off aspects of the keyboards, or how the data goes to the patches to kind of test drive things if you're doing things in rehearsal. Creating an interface such as this performer interface, which is very old now compared to what I use now, that can show the performer, Max is currently waiting for this note at this particular rehearsal letter. I can set this up and say I want to start at rehearsal letter J, and it understands where that is in the music, what needs to happen, the next pitch that is needed to be listened to, and exactly what's going to be happening when that pitch actually happens, which isn't a different thing than if I go to letter K. So how the performance patches then interact with the logistical patches is what creates this harmony around a successful interactive performance. So this is the piece that I'm going to perform. This is the program that I need to update to match what I'm going to be doing in performance with 2 small keyboards and also any other kind of changes that I want to make along the way. Over the next few weeks or months, or however long it takes when I can take the time to spare to devote to this project, I'm going to be working on this. The plan right now is to do what I did during my grad school years, which is to just realize the third movement, because that's the simplest to translate to a solo keyboard part without rewriting and reinventing the stuff that happened in movement 1 and movement 2, which are a lot more contingent upon the wind player in conjunction with the keyboard player. It's also the simplest to update the programming aspect of what's going on, because I only have to worry about maybe 13 to 15 cues as opposed to over 100 cues throughout the entire piece. The whole piece, with all 3 movements, was close to 30 minutes of music. This now is only going to be about 7.5 minutes worth of music. Who knows, after a while I may decide to go back and try to do movements 1 and 2 again and rewrite the piece, but honestly, I have another creative project coming down the pipeline that I need to start putting some serious work into that will also involve Max, but with a solo voice. So once this is done, I may pivot my efforts of Max programming into that, and may also do some developer blog videos about that project as well. So yeah, I think that's it for now. If you're interested in this and any of the other random content on my channel, then please consider subscribing and giving me some likes to this video or likes on my other content. All that stuff really helps me as a content creator. Remember to support your local performing artists who have been impacted the most by this COVID pandemic by checking out the links that I put into the description below. Thanks everybody for watching. When I move into the actual dev blog, I'm going to talk about some of the work that I already started to do before I decided to take this project into this blog sphere. I already did some stuff with the digital audio elements of this piece. I'm going to talk about that, show you the original and what I did to change it, finish that up by adding some volume controls and adding some other things that are needed to make the piece work, and then maybe do some work on the modified keyboard interface with the 2 keyboard controllers that I need to be able to set up. Until next time, stay safe and be well. Thanks for watching.